Welcome, everyone. The January 11th meeting of the Faculty Senate will come to order. Before we launch into the agenda, I have some reminders. These should sound very familiar, but after each presentation or report, senators will have the opportunity to ask questions or offer their comments. You can use, if you're a senator, the audio feature, or you can use the chat. Senators who raise their hand to speak will be recognized first. There are now two ways to raise your hand. If you have updated Zoom recently, you should at the bottom of your screen see an icon, a hand raise icon. You could just click right on that. If you don't see it, that's okay. You can raise your hand the old way, just to click on the participants icon at the bottom of your screen, and then you'll see the hand raise option there. So I do ask that you wait to be recognized before you speak. If you do choose to offer some audio feedback. And when you are recognized, please announce your first and last name and the name of your college. According to Robert's rules, senators are permitted to speak up to 2 times on any one motion. So if there's a motion on the floor and a senator has already been recognized twice, that senator may not be recognized for a 3rd time. Senators and panelists, if you aren't speaking, please remember to mute your microphones. And just one more thing before we get kind of kicked off and officially started with the agenda. So today, Rob Alsop joins us, and he'll be providing a budget update and information on the West Virginia legislative agenda. But because his presentation will likely overlap or inform the president's and the provost reports, we'll do questions and comments from the floor after the 3 of them have presented. So we won't do, president question and provost question and answer. We'll wait until all 3 have presented. So our first order of business is the approval of the minutes from our December 7th Senate meeting. The meeting minutes have been distributed as an annex in your agenda. Are there any additions or corrections to the minutes from the December meeting? I see a hand raised. Is that a leftover or residual, Julie? Or is okay, there we go. Okay, so hearing no corrections, the minutes are approved as written. So then we shall be moving on to our report from President Gee.
Well, thank you very much, Natalie. I hope you're doing well. Everyone, I hope everyone has had a good holiday, quiet as always, because of the fact that all of us have been sheltering more or less at home, I know. But I want to acknowledge first, as we begin this new semester, that we did make it through the last semester. And many people had great doubts about that when we started this, as I know. And so I'm grateful for your hard work and good deeds. I can just say this to you very honestly, that you, our faculty, have performed with great energy and courage. And for that, I'm grateful. And for that, this university is better. But before I begin my remarks, which I'll try to limit because of the fact that we do have both the vice president here and the provost here, and I know that they have many things that they're going to be discussing with you. I want to give you some brief reflections on last week's attack on our nation's democracy, and that's exactly the way that I feel about it. As Americans, we all have the right to free speech, something that I am very consistent about in terms of all of my conversations with you, and certainly the right to protest. But we must do so, and this is the word that I'm going to use for 2021 as my favorite word. We must do so with civility. We must do it civilly and peacefully. So there is never a rationale worthy of the violence and the mayhem and the flagrant disrespect demonstrated in that day Or let me just add that the violence demonstrated in other cities across this country over the past year, we have to condemn violence wherever it finds itself. As educators, our calling, as you know, is to prepare this generation that we are inheriting right now to uphold our nation's holy connected ideals, which I know we all believe in. And those ideals, to me at least, are individual accountability, collective action, and certainly informed debate. We must teach our students how to separate fact from fiction, truth from untruths, and we must do that ourselves. We must be truth tellers, knowing how to be careful consumers of information in today's information loaded time will lead to much more thoughtful, vibrant discussions of the important issues of the day. And obviously, I think that how we move forward, we have to move forward with the realization that we have to create campus culture that is warm and welcoming, that is free of racism, that is free of bias, is free of social injustice, that allows people to speak and be who they are, and recognize that that is the vital nature of our university. So as we prepare for the new semester, I just want us to remind each other of our noble calling, and that's what we have as members of this university. We have a very noble calling, and I want to express my appreciation to all of you for living that noble calling. A couple of other reminders. I want to encourage you to visit our Return to Campus webpage. Let me just say that again. Our Return to Campus webpage for all the latest information about COVID-19 protocols for our new semester. Finally, I'll just say this. We have immense headwinds in front of us. The pandemic will burn itself out. Many of us will get vaccinated. All of those issues, but this has been a mayhem in terms of its challenges for higher education. You're going to hear from Rob Alsop. I will say that all of you together, but certainly our financial team, have performed near magic in allowing us to make it through this semester without much of the kind of financial problems that have been faced by other institutions. And I want to just make that note presently. But we have a lot of issues that we have to deal with. We've got political climate that is just not friendly to higher education, whether it be at the state level or the national level. The value of higher education, I can tell you, is not viewed by a vast number of people as a common good. The provost is working very diligently with the faculty leadership here on transitions and transformations. I would just remind you something that I said the last time. I believe this as much as anything. I'll tell every faculty member, that is that we have no choice but to change. We have no choice. But we have the opportunity to be the architects of that change and to continue to have as our gold standard that the university is going to be better for the changes we make. So saying that, Natalie, I'm prepared to answer any questions after everyone else has had their say. Okay.
Yeah, perfect. Okay, so then next we'll hear from Provost Reid.
Hi, Natalie. Hi, everybody. Happy New Year. I hope you all had enjoyed your holidays despite the rather weird circumstances that we are living under. I do have a number of things to talk about, Natalie, so I'll just try to go through them as quickly as possible. I need to start by just briefly talking about our return to campus. As you all know, we begin classes a week from tomorrow on Tuesday, January 19th. As planned, the majority of our classes will be online, and about 33% of our course seats will be in face-to-face or hybrid sections. You know, it could be a rocky couple of months. I think you all probably realize that. We are facing very high rates of COVID, both in the state and in the country. And so, you know, circumstances not ideal, but quite frankly, we don't exactly know when they're going to get better. So the plan is to start with our limited on-campus instruction and do a lot of testing. But of course, everyone is going to need to be adaptable. And we've learned a lot from our first semester and how to do things. But again, I think we'll continue to have to be ready to adapt if, for example, there's a spike in cases early on. Just a little bit about testing. As you know, it is mandatory for all students and employees working on campus or studying on campus to have a COVID test here at the university and to demonstrate a negative result before coming to campus. Faculty will have access to information telling them which students are eligible to be in their classrooms and which are not, based on who has demonstrated a negative test. And faculty will again be expected to upload their seating charts with assigned seating at the beginning of the semester. And I do want, just for a moment, for Amanda Bastiani to share with you a little bit of information about both of those items.
She has to be promoted, so it'll be just a second.
Sure, no worries.
Okay, can you hear me? All right. Yeah, just to expand on what Marian said, we're going to be doing the notifications. Like she mentioned, we're going to have a negative test in order for a student to be in the classroom. So we're going to try this a new way this semester. We're going to put it in Navigate. I'm going to tag students and you'll be able to look up your class roster and see which one of your students are not eligible to be in class. And what I'll do later in the week, because we're have a lot of heavy testing going on this week, and a big bulk of that will not be done until really, I'll probably do a first load Friday, and we'll continue that as student tests roll in. But I'll tag that, and then what I'll do is I'll send some screenshots to let people know how they can access that information, because I know not everybody is familiar with Navigate. So that's what the plan is. And of course, if anybody has questions on how to use something or where they even find out if they have access to Navigate, although all instructors do, you can always reach out to me. So that's going to be for the tagging of students, so you know who in your class should and should not be there. The other part that she mentioned are the seating charts, and we're going to follow that same process that we followed last semester. They should be open and available for you to upload your seating charts by, the plan is by Thursday morning. So again, you know, that's what our plans are moving forward. I always appreciate that you guys are always very flexible about things that come up. And again, if you have questions, just let me know.
Great. Thank you so much, Amanda. Really appreciate that. We have some other COVID support things coming out of our office. I won't go over all of them. I'll have an email on Friday, but I did want to let you know that around tutoring. Last semester, the university organized and paid for tutoring for children of faculty to augment their mostly online K through 12 academic experience. The demand far exceeded our supply. It was a much bigger effort than we realized. But Prescia Niedermeyer has been working with Natalie and Ashley Martucci and faculty at CEHS to identify many more tutors, and we should be able to meet the demand this semester. Likely they'll be in group sessions. Of course, it's all on Zoom, and there'll be more information this week about that. I want to talk briefly about the phased incentive separation program that will be rolled out later this week by Talent and Culture. We had discussed this with the Faculty Senate exec, and I want to share with all of you before the information goes out on Thursday, a little bit about what it is and why we're doing it. So this was a program that was created in part because Talent and Culture had received a lot of questions from faculty and staff about retirement options. This has been, kind of coming up in the fall. And so a survey was sent out to solicit feedback about the kinds of things that employees want to see in a retirement program. And that resulted in the phased incentive separation program. It is different from the VSIP program that you may recall we announced 2 years ago. Number one, fewer years of service required. It's open to employees who have 15 or more years of service. Employees aren't actually required to retire and take benefits, but they are required to separate from the institution as a benefits eligible employee. There is a financial incentive to separate, but it is not as robust as the VSIP program. For financial reasons. And it is designed really for employees who really are on the cusp of making that decision about whether to retire and just need a little extra incentive to do so. It won't be a huge cost savings, though there will be some cost savings, and those revenues will go back to the colleges where they can redirect them to areas where they want to grow. I'm not going to go into all the details because it will be available and it'll be on the website, but I just wanted to alert you that this is coming up on Thursday so that you don't think it just came out of nowhere. In other news, in other information, I wanted to let you know that we have had a successful law school dean search. After a process of identifying 5 finalists and then bringing 2 back to campus, we have made an offer to a candidate who has accepted. And tomorrow there will be an announcement about who that person is. And I'm not going to steal the thunder of the announcement tomorrow, but I did want to let you know that we have completed that process. It was an excellent process. We had fine candidates, and it's amazing what we can do through Zoom. And I have a feeling that many academic searches will now be transformed by Zoom because that airport interview is very expensive and may become obsolete. And last but not least, I certainly don't want to bury the lead, as they say, but I did want to talk a little bit about strategic transformation that Gordon alluded to. And some of you are understanding that something is coming. So I want to give a bit of an overview. At the December 20th board meeting, President Gee issued a charge to campus to begin a process of strategic transformation designed to ensure the relevance of our academic programming, as well as the resiliency of our institution to weather the challenges that lie ahead. As you recall, we had EAB here in January, and they talked about declines in high school enrollments from the areas from where we recruit, declines in state funding, and the impacts that's having on higher education. President Gee said we need to reprioritize what we're doing as an institution so that we can grow enrollment and strengthen our R1 mission while realigning resources to programs, activities, and efforts that will ultimately enable our students to be successful. My office is in the very early stages of gathering data that will help to inform those efforts. And I will tell you, there's a lot of data that we have to gather, and it lives in a lot of different places. And I'm expecting it's going to take a couple of months to get all the data that we need. We're also partnering with EAB to help us to develop our approach and strategy. And specifically, we will be working with David Addis, who was the research specialist that came to the January Faculty Senate meeting last year. Academic transformation will likely entail a 2-pronged approach, one that looks at growth and opportunities, and another that looks at academic efficiencies. So growth and opportunities is the fun part. And it will likely involve us looking at growing current programs where there may be pent-up demand but limited capacity. It may involve creating new programs that may be missing from our academic portfolio that are highly relevant, market-driven, enrollment drivers, and those that advance our R1 position. And it may involve, and it will likely involve, strengthening our student success support structures to increase retention, persistence, and graduation rates. And truly, growth is very important, and that's probably where we're going to realize the most increase in revenues and reputation. But that said, growth takes time, and President Gee and our board expect that we will also look at academic efficiencies, believing that there are some cost savings that can be realized that can allow us to be redirected to invest in future growth. EAB has suggested there are several ways that we will need to look at this. One of them involves identifying academic programs that may no longer be as relevant as they once were, where student demand continues to decline and career opportunities are limited, and students carry a lot of debt, and or that may not be contributing to our R1 mission, and that may have a high cost to deliver. Looking at, can we eliminate redundancies or duplication in our academic offerings, courses, curricula, majors, and programs? EAB talks about something called instructional efficiencies, which are things like class fill rates, section sizes, faculty teaching assignments, and course releases. Are they consistent across academic units? Do we have a standard criteria by which we determine these things? And then another opportunity might be considering mergers or consolidations of academic programs or units if there are significant administrative cost savings, but I think more importantly, are there growth opportunities that could come from such collaborations, new growth opportunities. At the same time, Gordon would like us to revisit our faculty rewards and recognition structure to ensure that we are properly rewarding and recognizing faculty contributions that support future growth and opportunity. I'm going to be straight with you. We have not figured out exactly what this is going to look like. So there is no hidden agenda. There's no secret plan. Many other institutions have gone through this process. It is really going to be good to work with EAB because they have a great deal of expertise in this area and they know what's worked and they know what hasn't. And so we want to do things better than anybody else. I can assure you that faculty will be engaged in these discussions and they will have the opportunity to provide input. And not just at the end of the process, but at important points throughout. What that involvement and engagement will look like, I don't know exactly yet. I'm working with Natalie, your president, and your new president, Ashley Martucci, as well as EAB. And we are right now figuring out what that engagement will look like. And I do hope in the next couple of weeks to be able to share that with you. And certainly by the February meeting, I will have much more to report out to you. I will say that I know there's a lot of anxiety around this and a lot of fear, and I get it. Some of you have seen universities take this approach and just slash and burn, and it's not pretty, and it really hurts the institution. And I truly believe, I'm an optimist, but I'm also a pragmatist, and I truly believe we can do it better. And the way we're going to do that is to work on these things together in an atmosphere of mutual respect and trust. I think that we have tried very hard, our administration, to be transparent about the things we're doing, and we will continue to do so. What I would say to you is, and I think Gordon has said this very much more articulately than I can, but I don't believe we're facing an existential crisis right now. But if we don't move thoughtfully, strategically, and expeditiously, we could be in a very challenging position in the next couple of years. And I think that you will find that when Rob Alsop gives his budget presentation, I think that will also help to illuminate where we're at. And I would also recommend that we bring David Addis, or that you bring David Addis back to give an update on the state of higher ed. And that is my report.
Okay, I see one question in the chat, but I think we can wait on it. And we'll just, I have it noted. So I know to come back to it, but we're gonna move on to that sort of third agenda item, and that's the presentation from Vice President for Strategic Initiatives, Rob Alsop. And then I promise that we'll get back to the question. Okay, are you ready, Rob?
I am, thank you. So just quickly, and then I'll have a PowerPoint slide to go through. Whoop, sorry. I just wanted to echo what President Gee said about our democracy. I know I often brag that I'm a two-time graduate of this institution, and I can still remember some lectures with Drs. DeClerico and Hammock, and telling us about how one of the 5 most important events in American history was the presidential transition between Adams and Jefferson, where our democracy cemented the peaceful transition of power. And I never thought that America would get to the point where that would be challenged, and I certainly hope we never see it again, and how hard we have to work for our democracy to keep it going. So we have a lot of work to do together. I think last week was not a shining example of who we are. The second thing I wanted to reiterate is I'll talk about both short-term COVID and long-term budget and position for the university. And I'll try to refer that back and forth. I'm going to try to cover quite a bit of information quickly. It was a year ago, it seems like several years ago, but it was a year ago that I gave a presentation and talked about several of the things that are sort of a changing landscape for the university. I've actually pulled some of those slides to go back through them. So I doubt any of you, I doubt it was that much of an impression on your brain that you remember it, but in case they look familiar, they do. I'll walk through those, and then we'll bring some additional information on that both short-term and long-term story going forward. I do want to say thank you for all the work. When we went online in March, we were facing a potential catastrophic set of circumstances. And we asked everyone, as we sent our students home for the spring semester, to stop spending unless it was necessary, so that we could come out of fiscal year 2020 in a stronger position as is possible. And I think our university, all of us collectively together, in particular all of you, did a magnificent job in managing those expenses, particularly as you kept it up with working, whether it was in a research lab or in the classroom or through service for the institution. So thank you for that, and for the continued diligence this fiscal year. So with that, let's walk through the presentation. Okay, can you guys see the screen at this point? Am I sharing the PowerPoint? Okay, good. So again, similar presentation about a year ago, and we'll walk through some slides. So for today, we'll talk briefly about our financial history. We'll recap our financial model and what drives it today. We'll talk about the 5-year financial plan, what's changed and what hasn't. We'll talk about fiscal year 2020 in particular. And again, I'll walk through the good job that all of us did in working through that. We'll talk about WVU and our COVID-19 revenue losses and expenditures, and how that's impacting our current fiscal year 21 and looking beyond. And then we'll touch briefly on the upcoming legislative session. So our financial history. We have, for the past several years, worked on incredibly thin margins. If you look at fiscal years 2016 and through fiscal year 2020, on a $1 billion budget, you can see total revenues going across of just around $1 billion, 1.021 billion in 2016, going up to 1.142 billion in 2020, right around that 1 to 1.1 billion. Our margins have been anywhere from a -2.5 to a +3 over that period of time. And you can see for fiscal year 2020, and these are from our accrued financial statements with some adjustments, our adjusted operating margin was around a -7 million. A business entity that has a $1 billion budget, you should run 2 to 3 to 4% positive margins in the average. Now, as an institution of higher education and a public entity, that may be a little bit less than other institutions would do, but you really want to have that positive margin so you can continue to reinvest in programs that are growing. You can invest in new programs that need to get to market, and you can invest in your people, which is who we are. And so when you really struggle to make the bottom line meet, other than a balanced budget where you're expecting all of your anticipated revenues just to meet all of your anticipated expenditures, it doesn't leave a lot of cushion. And you can see a couple times over the past few years where we've gone into the red for that instead of having a cushion. So again, incredibly thin margins. And our financial model has changed. So over the past several years, some great things that have gone on at the university. We've invested a lot in our people. We have invested in our capital projects, and so you can see that there have been a number of upgrades that have been done over the past several years. These capital projects, we issued a significant amount of debt to take on these projects, and they've benefited the campus, but they've also are now part of our overall budget going forward. We've talked about this before. We've also seen a reduction in our state appropriations. Fiscal year 21 was actually just about the same as fiscal year 20. So we've seen some stability through 19, 20, and 21. But I think everybody expects that, given, and I'll talk about this later, the current makeup of the legislature and the current trends in higher education, we certainly wouldn't expect a V-shaped recovery in state appropriations over the next decade. And what we'll be hoping for is stability. We've also had to do a lot of cutting. Since 2016 and prior to 2020, we had made $69 million in reductions. You add the $35 million in FY21 that we did, and you see we get up to over $100 million in cuts that we have done to our budget over the past 5 years. Those have included our voluntary separation incentive program, which reduced headcount by more than 135, as well as programs like shared services, where we moved to reduce headcount to do savings. One of the things that we often talk about is, well, you didn't really reduce spending, you just decreased the rate of increase. I'll talk about this here in a minute, but that's no longer true. Our budgeted expenses for 21 are actually less than our 2020 actual expenses. And that's because of some decline in enrollment and market pressure for tuition that we are seeing. So, and this will prove that out. And again, I'll provide this PowerPoint to Natalie so she can circulate it. I know there's a lot of information I'm covering quickly. But next, I just wanted to talk about WVU's tuition and fees mix. There's a couple of things I want to point out on this chart. So you can see 2013 in the top column, 2013, we forward to 2016 for a snapshot, and then I have 2020 and a new 2021 projected. These are all of our sources of tuition and fee revenue, whether it comes from, as you can see, private payers, Pell Grants, federal, state, and local grants, foundation scholarships, promise scholarships, or our that is unfunded, our total funded aid, and then you can see our total discounted aid in the red column. So a couple of things to point out. In 2013, we collected from all sources outside the university in 2013, $348 million in tuition. By 2020, we collected $392 million. You'll see that in 2021, we are only projected to collect $378 million in tuition revenues net. So we've actually seen a decline in the amount of tuition and fees that we will collect going forward. You can also see that the total discounted aid has grown from 48 million up to a projected 113 million this year. Again, that's where we've had to grant more unfunded or discounts, unfunded scholarships or discounts to our students. And when you look at our gross tuition and fees, you can see that you go from 2020, where there's 500,348,000 in total gross tuition and fees, down to 492. So again, given COVID and some enrollment trends, we've seen a decline in those tuition dollars as we move forward. The final thing on this chart, this final point that I want to make as it relates to this chart, goes to the percentage of funded aid to total aid. So in 2013, 60% of our aid to students was funded. That's down at 40%, so it's completely flipped right now. And so one of the things we've worked with the foundation is to raise more money for scholarships to turn that aid into funded aid. A big part of our challenging and changing financial model is this reality. So I just want to tee up one other thing before I get to talk about 2020 and 2021 as we look at our long-term financial horizon. We usually look at our financial situation on a 5-year basis. And this is the same chart that I presented last year. So here are some major assumptions that we put in to our budget for, this is pre-COVID, for moving forward for FY20 through FY24. So we assume some, I will say, some cost of living adjustments for tuition. Our first-time freshmen, hoping it will be around 49, and then increasing by 100 for FY21, and then by 50 and getting to stable by the end of FY22. Some retention and persistence growth, and some what I'll call cost of living, housing rate increase, and institutional aid moving forward. And you can see we just, to see what we do, we put in some salary increases there. So if we were to hit pre-COVID, hit these numbers of first-time freshmen and retention and persistence growth, again, 4,900 first-time freshmen moving through the 5-year plan. This is what our financial model looked like pre-COVID. And so you can see our cash margin down towards the bottom of the chart. In FY20, we were predicting to make about 1.6 million in cash. In 21, we would generate about 12.6 million in extra cash. We'd lose a little bit due to some debt service in FY22. And then you can see FY23 and 24, we see positive margins. And from that adjusted accrual margin, you can see us growing to where we start to reach those consistent positive margins going forward. But what we also talked about is how we live at the margins and what happens if our first-time freshmen don't meet or exceed 5,000, but instead we lose 300 first-time freshmen. So we took that model and we flipped it, and the only change we made was going from 4,900 first-time freshmen, instead of going up to 5,000 and then 5,100, we moved that down to lose 300 freshmen. And when we did that, you can see the compounding effect of those smaller classes. When we go to FY22, 23, and 24, you see negative numbers and the university in a mode of cutting. And so this was really designed to show those narrower margins that we face, and the fact that our ability to recruit and retain our students is going to be a big driver of our budget realities moving forward. So all of that, when we came out of last year's meeting, we talked about how we wanted to, as Marianne indicated, through transformation or part of it, identifying resources that will allow for investment in strategic priorities that will maximize our opportunities. Also comes with that looking to make sure that our programs are, everything we do at the institution actually has a focus on driving enrollment and programs that students want to participate in. We want to develop that structurally sound budget with attainable assumptions to get those positive margins, which I spoke about. We want to increase our cash and maintain our bond ratings. So all that coming into COVID, some headwinds for higher education, but an institution that is strong and looking at all of higher education relatively strong as we move forward. And then COVID hit. So as I mentioned, for fiscal year 20, when March of last year hit, things quickly changed. Not only did we have our VSIP, but we had a number of things that we had to work towards to manage the fiscal year 2020 budget. We had to look at the COVID impact of expenses and revenue loss, which were significant, and I'll go through here in just a minute. The good news from the CARES Act, which again, I'll go through here in a minute. As you'll recall, we did the temporary furlough, which largely impacted, I think exclusively impacted our staff for several months, a couple of months during the summer. We put a number of spend, and in particular travel spend controls, to try to reduce spend and preserve our margin and our cash for fiscal year 20. And then we did some pretty significant accounts payable management. So if your bill's due in 30 days, we sometimes stretch that to 40 or 65 to preserve cash. And we monitor our cash on a daily basis to make sure that we had sufficient funds for things like payroll and paying our vendors. And then we did it's not a debt defunding, we did a debt refunding, excuse the typo, that preserved some of our cash for the next couple of years. So for fiscal year 2020, we ended up with 1.18 billion in revenues. There was, I will say, around $40 million in revenues we transferred over from the foundation that were research trust funds. They were not operating monies at all. They just show up on our balance sheet. But it was something to improve that from a bond rating perspective. Total expenses of around 1.14. So again, the 1.18, if you reduce the 40 million in foundation funds, which didn't affect our bottom line, we were about break even. As you can see, our primary revenues are net tuition and fees. And secondly, led by gifts, grants, and contracts. So over half of our budget through tuition and fees, gifts, grants, and contracts. State appropriations only make 16% of our budget at this point. And our expenses, salaries and wages and benefits make up 60% of our budget and really dominate and dwarf all of our other expenditures moving forward. So a really good story for fiscal year 2020 is that we were able to preserve our cash. That's really a function of two things. One, everybody really bought in to the need to preserve our cash position for fiscal year 2020. We have a goal to grow that 69 back up into the 80s. Most of our peers have 90 or above days of cash on hand. And that's important for purposes of investing in new programs, liquidity purposes, and our bond rating moving forward. In addition to the strategies that we used to preserve cash through the CARES Act, we also had the ability to delay the payment of payroll taxes by a period of 18 to 30 months from that period of time. And so there's actually $7 million of cash that's otherwise due to the federal government that's also helping that cash by a couple of days. We would have probably been around 67 days cash on hand or 66 without taking advantage of that portion of the CARES Act. But again, that's sort of like an interest-free loan. So we came out of 2020, given what could have occurred, in a really decent position and heading towards fiscal year 21. We had a lot of lost revenue, but we were also able to reduce our expenses. And with the federal CARES Act money we received, we really came out about even. Fiscal year 21, I think it's another year of challenge, and let me walk through a few things to highlight that. So first, as I mentioned, for our 5-year plan, we were talking about 4,900 to 5,000 first-time freshmen. So for fiscal year 21, we ended up with 4,508 first-time freshmen. A lot of schools saw a drop in enrollment. This is a story really of lower enrollment from West Virginia residents and from international students. Our non-resident population actually exceeded some of our estimates, which served to hedge some of the financial loss that we could have had it been more evenly mixed. I think if you look at our retention rates from fall to spring this semester, we're also seeing a higher than average return of our non-resident students and a lower than average return of our West Virginia residents, which is a concerning trend for us. But one of the big drivers of our fiscal year 21 budget is the fact that we do have a smaller class size than we were predicting pre-COVID. The other thing related to COVID is we have a lot of COVID expenses that we needed to take care of. Now, this may not be entirely comprehensive and exclusive, but this is a fairly good list of all of the expenses that we're looking at. We think we'll spend $23 million extra on COVID expenses this year. And that's everything. As you can see, the largest group here is testing at around 8.6 million. But you can see we've spent almost 1.6 million in sanitizing products and disinfection of our facilities, 2.7 million in busing and related transportation costs where the PRT has been down, almost $1 million in student support and social distancing measures. And you can go through the list of a number of things, over $1 million on PPE we've spent. And so we have had a significant amount, $23 million, we think, by year end of COVID expenses. You will also note, and this is not as comprehensive, but just to give you an example that these numbers add up quick. We had intended on probably around a 2% tuition increase. We did not do that. And so we saw a $9 million gross tuition revenue loss, and that will compound each year that we were unable to charge that. We reduced the university fees because students were not on campus by almost $6 million. We had a housing and dining revenue loss by delaying the semester by a week of 1.8 million. And you can go through the line on down the line, and you can see it's almost a $26 million loss in revenues for the campus. Now, I will say this does not include athletics. As we all know, athletics, or maybe you do, maybe you don't, has been self-sustaining. They also are going to see a significant loss this year, and we're working through that with them for the year moving forward. So that's 23 million in expenses and over 25 million in revenue losses going forward. So what have we tried to do to reduce and manage through this pandemic? So we did have a budget cut of around $35 million for our initial expected budget. We paused and reevaluated several of our capital projects. We have worked to maximize our reimbursement of expenses and losses of revenues at the state and federal level. That's with Governor Justice and the CARES Act. We've worked with our congressional delegation on the new COVID Act that passed in December, as well as working with FEMA. As I mentioned, we are taking advantage of some bond debt refinancing. We took advantage of several other provisions of the CARES Act, and then we are going to issue some debt for some deferred maintenance projects. And let me just hit on that. Each year, we spend several million dollars, I think it's around 40, on deferred maintenance projects around the institution. And so whether that's classroom refreshes or fixing infrastructure such as piping or work with utilities, there's a certain amount of work we do to our buildings to keep them refreshed. We hope to issue around $20 million worth of debt to preserve cash to take care of some of those projects. All designed so that we do not lose a significant amount of our cash or have a significantly unbalanced budget for fiscal year 21 going forward. Before I come back to 21 and beyond, let me just give you a summary of our federal relief because I've gotten several questions on it. Last spring, we got $20 million of CARES Act money. 10 million of that was a grant that had to go directly to our students, and we did that, $10.8 million. The rest, an additional allotment of $10.8 million, we could use to cover costs related to the changes for the delivery of instruction due to COVID. The university used these monies to offset more than 13.6 million in housing and dining refunds. So all of the CARES money for the spring either went to the students or to offset part of our losses. In December, Congress passed additional relief similar to the CARES Act, and WVU is expected to receive funds in 2 installments. So we're going to get, according to the APLU, around $30 million. We have to spend the same amount that we got from the spring, 10 million, to provide emergency assistance to our students, the same as before. And we have to spend and then we can spend the rest of the 20 million on COVID expenses or revenue losses associated with the change in discovery. The revenue losses associated with COVID. So what's this mean? The COVID relief we've obtained from the federal and state government, along with the budget cuts and the debt relief issuance that we have done, we've been able to make it through so far this year, and I'm hoping for the rest of this fiscal year, without impacting anybody's retirement, without doing, other than the furlough we did in the summer in which folks were made whole, any significant layoffs or across the board pay reductions for the institution. I know a number of institutions had to go there, and I'm really proud of the financial team and the work of our faculty, our staff in preserving expenses so that we could avoid those types of challenges for the institution. And I'm hopeful that we'll make it through the rest of the year without having to resort to any of those things moving forward, and that we'll come out of fiscal year 2021 in decent shape. I do think that we will have to work hard to preserve our cash. I think from an accrual-based budget, we will have a negative margin um, given where things stand from an overall budgeting perspective. But again, I am hopeful that we will make it out of 21 from a cash perspective, similar to 20. One thing that is, I will note, is we have about, at this point, $20 million worth of deferrals on payroll taxes to the federal government that'll be due at the end of calendar year 21 and 22 that will draw down on some of that cash. So we are making progress in addressing our challenges related to COVID. And I'm hopeful that from a cash and overall financial perspective, from some of those metrics to come out in a relatively healthy position from the short term. Again, from the long term, as we look beyond, a lot of those challenges we talked about last year in terms of enrollment, state appropriations, and looking to see that we have the resources to be able to invest in our strengths still remain a challenge for us to work through as an institution going forward. And those metrics, I would say at some point are still the same or are murkier. You know, enrollment for next year, and this is not my expertise, but I get updates on it from a financial perspective anyway. You know, deposits across the country, not just for WVU, are down for next year. So there's a great deal of uncertainty as to when students are going to come back and at what level they'll come back. I'm hoping that there's a burst of energy and we'll have a different type of roaring 20s once we reach the point of vaccination and herd immunity, and we'll see folks coming back to us as an institution from an enrollment perspective. But it's something that we just need to be prepared for as an institution. So the 2021 legislative outlook, and I'll end up here in just a couple of minutes. So during the 2020 elections, Republicans saw significant gains in both the House and the Senate. They have supermajorities. They hold more than 2/3 of both houses. And so they can override the governor not only without any Democratic support. They can not only pass and override substantive legislation, but they can pass and override any budgetary vetoes from the governor. They also have the ability to put constitutional amendments on the ballot without support from any Democrats. And so they do have super majorities going forward. In the House, the leadership by and large stayed the same. In the Senate, Senate President Mitch Carmichael was defeated in the primary. And so we have a new Senate President, President Craig Blair from the Eastern Panhandle. He was finance chair prior to his election as Senate President. You know, they've been really dealing with COVID and determining the process of the legislative session, which we do not know fully yet. There are a couple of things that we know that they're working on from a big picture perspective, and the governor has indicated that he supports, is a reduction in the personal income tax for the state of West Virginia, and some calling for its outright repeal. A repeal of the personal income tax would be over half of the state's budget, and so there would have to be significant expense reductions or increases to other taxes or reduction of other tax exemptions to fill that revenue loss to meet the provisions of a balanced budget. What I've heard by and large is a reduction over time as the state could, quote, afford it as things move forward, or as I mentioned, there are a number of exemptions to the consumer sales tax that they may consider repealing. As an example, one that's often talked about is when you receive a bill from your accountant or your lawyer, you do not have to pay sales tax on those services. And so there's some talk about broadening the sales tax base to pay for some of the personal income tax reductions. That is the information relating to taxes has been most of the information that has come forward. I think that there'll be a lot of questions and talk about what government will look like from a remote worker perspective post-COVID and whether there are any savings that can occur from that perspective going forward. As you may be aware, the legislative session actually does not start in mid-January. It does not start until mid-February this year because it's a start of a new gubernatorial term. And so we don't have as many tea leaves to read moving forward. From a revenue perspective, there is a belief that with Democrats taking the Senate in Washington, that there will be a COVID stimulus for state and local governments. Our revenues have, at the state level, have been okay. They haven't set the world on fire, but they have not seen any cliffs, at least not that they've reported on to date. So hopefully at a minimum, we'll see some budget stability, particularly if there is another set of federal stimulus moving forward. As it relates to education, we have not heard a whole lot about higher education in general. There has been a lot of talk about additional changes to K-12, and in particular, the legislature's interest in removing some of the autonomy that the state school board has currently under the Constitution. But again, just big picture perspectives on that. And we have not heard about any particular items that will or will not move during this legislative session, like the soda tax or anything related to guns on campus at this point. But we are keenly listening and checking with all of our sources on anything that would relate to WVU. And as we get closer to that mid-February timeline, we'll have more information for our faculty and staff. So with that, I'm happy to join in with Gordon and Marianne and answer any questions.
Okay, so now would be the time for questions. We still have a lot to get to on our Senate agenda for today. And so I'm going to put about a 10-minute cap on questions. So are there questions from the floor? Oh, I see a lot of, no, actually, I just see a couple. Okay, so I'll start with then the couple of questions in the chat. This question, I believe, is probably for Marianne, and it's about strategic planning. And the question is, how does equity and inclusion fit into that strategic planning?
And that was from Wagner, I think?
From Wagner, correct.
Yeah, and I have some thoughts, but I'm curious, what Wagner, can you maybe clarify what you mean by that in the context of the sort of looking at academic efficiencies? I mean, I have some thoughts, but I'm curious what you're thinking.
Sure. I'm just thinking how, this, when we have restructuring, we actually want to allocate budgets, right? And we want to make it more efficient. And I think that's a great opportunity for us to think how we can make our university not only efficient more monetarily wise, but also how we can foster this to create a more inclusive environment at the university level.
That's great. Thank you for that, Wagner. I would say, that there are, when we go through this process, again, we haven't identified exactly what our variables are, right? So there'll be a rubric that we'll design and we'll engage faculty around that. There are those things that are dollars and cents, right? And then there are those other things that are about our strategic priorities as an institution and our values. Right. So we want to make sure that that is factored in to what we do. And that includes our approach to diversity and inclusion in terms of, our curriculum, what we're doing to help students, diverse students be successful here, and faculty. And so those have to be factored in. And so that's really where I think some of those faculty inputs will be so important.
I appreciate that, Marianne. Yeah. I would even suggest that equity and inclusion should be even a priority in this restructuring.
Absolutely, and there are financial aspects to that as well, right? In terms of really attracting diverse students to the university. So it's the right thing to do, and it's a smart thing to do.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
There was another question from the attendees, and I suppose anybody could answer this, but is there an update on the planned schedule for vaccines?
Yep. This upcoming, excuse me, so the guidance we have received from the CDC and from the state in particular is that we need to focus on vaccination by age. And so we have sent some surveys out to those who are 50 and older as to their willingness to take a vaccine. I think we have over 1,000 of our employees who have signed up and said, yep, count me in as soon as I can get my vaccination. That survey, by the way, is still open. So if you missed that time and you're 50 or over, I think, you can still get in and get in line to get your vaccination. The Higher Education Policy Commission received, as part of Phase 1D, an allocation of 1,000 vaccines a week. And they are distributing those to, they are making distribution choices based on how many people we say are ready to take the vaccine to all of the public and private institutions across the state. And so we got 120 shots the first week, 110 the next week. We actually received 200 for this week, and we're going to get another 200 for the next week. And so I think just about everybody 65 and older who has requested by the survey to receive a vaccine for WV employee has received one, and we're now moving to the 60 and older, and then we'll move to the 50 and older population. And as we get through that, we will reduce the age and continue to move through from this semester. We're hoping that that weekly dosage will, for higher ed, will increase. We also know the state and the hospital are preparing for the community as well. Going forward, right now, I don't know when that 1,000 per month per week for higher ed will increase. I do know I do know that the incoming Biden administration, I should say, has indicated a policy change which may benefit to get more vaccines to everyone. Right now, the Trump administration is holding back around 55% of the vaccines for the second dose, which we all need if we're going to be vaccinated. The Biden administration has indicated that it's going to ramp up production and it's going to push out most of those shots. So towards the latter part of January, we may see the state's allocation grow significantly for vaccinations. And I would expect that our allocation for higher ed would grow at that point in time. So I guess to sum up quickly, we'll continue to send out surveys as appropriate and get that list, and then we'll keep on chugging to get as many people vaccinated as quickly as we can.
Okay, so I don't see any hands yet, but a couple of questions in the chat. So I don't know if this would come out of your office, Provost Reid, but somebody's asking if the survey could be reposted. So maybe Kim could post that.
Yeah, actually, we had a conversation about that this morning, and there'll be an e-news update this week that will say how you can continue to fill out that survey.
Okay, thank you. A couple more in the chat. GTA is asking if he can choose to hold his scheduled on-campus classes online until he's vaccinated. We assume the answer is no, but wanted to get the official response. The official response is
no.
Yeah. Okay. Next, from Scott Critchlow, Dr. Marsh in today's lengthy email said the worst is yet to come, and we may see a peak in the virus around the end of the month. Provost said we need to be ready to adapt if there's a spike. If our head of health sciences anticipates that to occur, why wait until after the spread has happened to suspend in-person classes? Why not pause for the first 2 weeks?
That's a really good question. And I think, Rob can reinforce it, but our health and wellness committee, which includes some faculty, decided that it wasn't prudent to go online to start the semester for a couple reasons. One is that we don't know when this surge will end. And so, if we made a decision to go online for 2 weeks, and it may be another 6 weeks or 2 months before the vaccine is available, that we just don't know. And I think that was, Rob, am I correct? That was the recommendation of the health committee, the safety committee.
Yeah, so we talked about it in the Health and Safety Committee, and when it's a really good question. I think it's a really careful balancing act between what are your testing capabilities, what are your abilities in the classroom to keep folks safe, what all precautions do you have, and the desire to meet, I think, student needs of in-class, or at least the ability for in-class participation, that we decided that we would bring our students back, work through it, and if we need to pause like we did in the spring, or excuse me, like we did in the fall, that we would, but we'd monitor the situation on the ground.
Thank you. This question is about the political climate, nation's political climate. So what's prepared for the return to campus next week in response to the political climate? And given that the inauguration is on the second day of spring classes, is there anything planned? Are there any contingency plans or?
Well, you know, we are always monitoring. We have an action group that monitors the issues that are occurring outside the university as well as within the university. But I'm hopeful that it will go off as planned, but we will always be prepared in case there is some actionable items that do occur on or near our campus.
Okay, thank you. So I'm going to go ahead and pause, move on to the next agenda item. Folks, if you have questions, you can certainly send those to me. There's a faculty Senate email if you'd like to send your questions anonymously. You can also approach the faculty welfare chair, Maria Kohler, and send an email to her. Okay, and we'll make sure that those questions are answered. Okay, so we're going to move on. We've got a presentation from Associate Provost for Academic Personnel, Presha Niedermeyer, on faculty teaching evaluations. Presha, are you ready?
Yes, thanks, Natalie. So thank you, everybody, for having me here to talk about this. I've been asked today to report to you on some of the activities that we have engaged in during the past 17 months since Associate Provost Latimer and I have joined the Office of the Provost. I note that Provost Reid has added a position to split the former position of academic affairs into two positions, with one now concentrating on faculty culture and development, fulfilled by Dr. Melissa Latimer, who prior to coming to the Office of the Provost had been instrumental in the promotion and tenure process for the past 7 years. And she also served as director of the Advanced Centers. Among the initiatives of the Advanced Center was to design and deliver the Change Agent course, which has been given on WVU's campus 6 times over the past 4 years. I joined the Office of the Provost after directing the Women's Leadership Initiative for 3 years, an initiative that Provost Reid co-founded to increase the number of leadership positions for women on WVU's campus and beyond. We were welcomed into the office by Chris Staples, who has been an integral part of the Academic Affairs and Personnel team for the past 4.5 years. This short report will focus on the promotion and tenure process that evaluates 3 areas of significant and reasonable performance: teaching, research, and service. Within teaching, I understand that you asked specifically about the electronic student evaluations of instruction. These instruments comprise but a small piece of the larger evaluation process. This macro level considers various larger aspects of performance. But before I begin that discussion, I'd like to assure you that in the 3 decades of performance evaluation at this institution, we have never had a promotion or a tenure case that was denied exclusively as a result of performance on ESEIs. For the past 17 months, we have been concentrating on 3 areas. I'll state each of the areas first, and then I'll circle back for more discussion on each. First is increasing the holistic evaluation of teaching to move to more closely resemble that of research, intentionally decentering ESEIs as the mechanism for determining teaching effectiveness. Second, we focused on improving transparency and equity of the promotion and tenure process. And third, we focused on increasing the breadth and the depth of training offered to faculty and administrators. For my overarching point of concentration, I mentioned that we had been increasing the holistic evaluation of teaching to more closely resemble that of research, intentionally decentering ESEIs as the mechanism for determining teaching effectiveness. To this end, we have offered new seminars on writing a teaching narrative, offered by Milena Bernstein, and on developing a teaching portfolio, offered several times by the Teaching and Learning Commons' Tracy Beckley. We are also working to develop a sample portfolio within WVU to allow faculty to view this in addition to those that are available externally. We have revisited the promotion and tenure documents that establish what was required or voluntary in teaching, to establish meritorious ratings in teaching, which are not merely related to ESEIs. These items include narratives, mentor visits, peer visits, evaluations, examples of cases written, exercises written, other in-class materials or pedagogical articles written, etc. You may refer to your college's or department's promotion and tenure documents referenced off the Provost's website to note that in all colleges, other measures of performance may be evaluated. However, these must be added by the faculty member to digital measures in order to be considered. We have encouraged faculty through the use of narratives and development of portfolios to begin incorporating more information that can be used by the faculty evaluation committees in the evaluation of teaching in all of our messaging in person and on the web. We have worked with deans to charge faculty evaluation committees to take into account the modifications for COVID-19 and the alternative measures of performance that were allowable for the evaluation of teaching. We anticipate that while this was particularly important during the dual pandemics, this will change the way that faculty evaluation committees have historically approached the P&T process. We have included an opt-in early assessment of teaching survey that would inform the faculty early, as its name suggests, as to their students' assessment of the faculty's in-class performance in a manner that was developmental, unless the faculty decided to place that instrument into his, her, their digital measures record for evaluation by the faculty evaluation committee. The Teaching and Assessment Committee Chair, Jessica Vanderhoff, provided macro level detail with these items of evaluation to the Office of the Provost. Line item detail was not provided. The second initiative I suggested was that we were working to improve the transparency and the equity of the promotion and tenure process. We engaged an individual to provide an external review of our current P&T document to benchmark against best practices. Our document was evaluated based on 7 criteria. First, accountability and consistency. Second, accountability, diversity, and inclusion. Third, transparency and consistency. Fourth, the recognition of contributions to diversity and inclusive mission. Fifth, flexibility and work life. Sixth, flexibility and transparency. And the 7th, clarity. We will continue to work with the information provided in the external audit in making any changes to the promotion and tenure document. We've begun to focus on augmenting the evaluation of the review of teaching and service to provide the same level of depth and breadth as to that associated with research historically. This allows for similar equity for teaching, service, and research positions. To this end, we have worked with the committee to develop a video to inform students of constructive feedback and implicit bias, providing again, constructive feedback. We have endeavored to clarify and value things that teaching and service professors are doing, and then reward them for doing it well. This included increasing the length of contracts for service professors to mirror that was available for teaching professors. That involved changing a Board of Governors rule and the promotion and tenure document. We have allowed for specific accommodation to be made to address faculty concerns during the COVID pandemic, including an opt-out extension to the tenure clock and the ability to remove ESEIs in the spring of 2020. I note that although this was a possibility, less than 3% of the faculty used this option. Similarly, we have an alternative mechanisms in place for the removal of inappropriate student evaluations developed by the Teaching and Assessment Committee. There were no faculty who requested such a removal during the fall of 2020. In addition to the external audit of the promotion and tenure document, we have reviewed how our peer institutions of the Big 12 and several other schools are evaluating teaching. All of these schools require ESEIs, and few have any other mandates that are required with regard to teaching, as opposed to voluntary insertions in individual files. Finally, our third point of emphasis has been to augment the training that faculty and administrators receive. We now have various of these trainings that have been transcribed so that if individuals were unable to attend the event, they may log on at their leisure and listen to the trainings. These offerings are listed on the Provost website, and the upcoming offerings are listed both on the Provost website and that of the Teaching and Learning Commons. This fall, we have had multiple opportunities, over 20, not counting the drop-in sessions that were available. And this spring, we'll have even more opportunities for faculty to engage in leadership training, stress reduction, and skill development opportunities, among others. This augmentation of faculty development and training has involved working with the deans, working with the chairs, working with the faculty, and additionally, there has been an increased emphasis on rewards for excellence in teaching, with significant increases in the nominations of faculty for various regional and national awards. I appreciate your listening to this brief summary of our activities over the past 17 months. If you desire to have any more information on any of these areas, we're certainly glad to come to your individual subcommittee to discuss. And the process for so requesting would just involve an email to one of us, and we'll respond promptly. Thanks, Natalie.
Are there questions for Associate Provost Niedermeyer? Yeah, Marianne, we can include that. So the question is, will the report of the Associate Provost or academic personnel be included in the minutes? We can do that.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, but normally the process would be to raise your hand. And then...
I'm looking for the little hand. I can't find it.
So okay, so it's at the it's fine. We're fine now.
All right.
For future reference, if you click on participants, you should see the hand raise option. Go ahead and tell us what college you're from.
Okay, I'll make it quick. In this past semester, we saw a dramatic increase in the number of, by the way, I'm sorry, I'm Victor Musino from Mechanical and Aerospace Engineering, College of Engineering. In this past semester, we saw a dramatic increase in the number of complaints from students, complaints about courses, and a large number of final grade appeals. In many, many cases, the issues have to do with the hardship imposed by the COVID-19 pandemic and the remote learning environment. Eventually, those complaints and the final grade appeals bring expressions of frustration and anger that have little to do with academic performance, and that have to do a lot with the stress caused by the situation, in such way that everybody is affected and everybody understands that. But many students feel that they are the only ones that are affected by this. And the issue is that eventually it has an impact in SEIs. As a member of a PNT committee, I can also see the comments from students, expressions of frustration that have an impact on this. And I'm just asking the question if if something's going to be done about it to put things in perspective, so that students don't feel that they are being let down. Many of them feel that they are being let down, and they don't realize that they are not being let down, but they still express those feelings of frustration, and they do take it on the SEIs as a way to settle the score. On top of sending, they don't even complain directly to the professor or to the chairman. They go directly to the provost, or sometimes to the president. So before we know, there is a letter from a mother or a father sent to the president with a lot of misinformation, because it's like a second-hand description of the situation, described by a student to a parent, and from the parent to the president, and then all the way down to us. So this is consuming a lot of time, causing a lot of stress. And I think that something needs to be done. And of course, we are handling this at our own level with the resources that we have. We do the best we can. But I just wanted to share this concern that we have. If anybody would like to give us a little take on that. Thank you.
Victor, I'll jump in. It's Marianne. What I would say to you is, by the way, the time that you spend on dealing with these complaints, we deal with them too in our office. I would say Associate Provost Evan Witters big part of his job now is responding to every parent, every student. And
I am
usually the complaints are about remote learning, right? And either the student doesn't enjoy that kind of instruction or wants more interaction, or the parent doesn't recognize the interaction that the student is having with the faculty member. What we can do, and I think, and I'll ask my team, is we can look and see if there's been, well, let me just first of all say that what we learned is that the grade average of students did not change significantly at all. It's almost the exact same GPA and grade in classes that we saw in the previous semester. So in essence, their fears were not necessarily realized in the grades. But I think we have communicated, and we can communicate more forcefully to the academic leadership and to SEI committees about the importance of taking in all aspects of contributions that faculty made this semester, because there were really incredible efforts to try to reach students. And we did state that, but we can reinforce that in the evaluation process that begins this spring, because those files are already closed. And certainly, I mean, we can take a look and see if we see a pattern in SEIs on the whole, and if there's something more that we can do about it. But I hear you. And we will certainly look into that and, and see, if there's anything we can do on our end. But again, I think it's going to be imperative for all levels of evaluation to look at the total file and not just SEIs this spring. For the fall.
Thank you very much.
Yep.
One more thing, if I may, just as an opportunity for development for next semester, and many have used it this semester as well, that I mentioned, was this opt-in early assessment of teaching opportunity that would allow one to see, how students were perceiving their in-classroom experience, and to actually speak to anything that they, thought was not going exactly as anticipated. So it would provide the point of information that Provost Reid suggested in terms of a learning experience for all. So that is, however, opt-in. So one does need to do that in order to have that be a bit of feedback.
Any other questions? Let's see one in the chat from Carrie Valentine. What are plans to decrease the likelihood that you are or BIPOC faculty experience bias results in the area of teacher evaluation?
Okay, so thanks again for that question, and let me just say once again that no one has ever been not granted promotion or tenure based exclusively on, again, teacher evaluations by students. That having been said, to address your question specifically, Carrie, we are looking at data from various aspects and working with other administrative units to get that data, and then to work consistently to make sure that that experience is not had, basically, so that there aren't biased results in that area.
Okay, so last question before we move on. Are there any plans, this is from Anne-Marie Hibbert, are there any plans at the university level to consider more uniform standards regarding the integrity of online testing?
I'm not sure I really understand the question.
Yeah, Anne-Marie, do you want to do you want to explain your question? We can't hear you. I don't know if your mic is off. So she said, for example, not making respondus optional. So this must be student academic integrity.
I'm not sure. Evan, is that a question you could answer?
I'm not sure. Does she mean optional, meaning that everyone has to use the same platform? Certainly some departments don't feel that Respondus is necessarily rigorous enough without live proctoring, and so they use other proctoring products. if instead, and you mean that all testing on campus should have to use some sort of lockdown browser, I don't know. That's probably outside the purview of our office and more sort of a departmental question.
Can you hear me now, Evan?
Yes.
I'm sorry, I was trying to get my microphone on. Anne-Marie Hibbert from Chambers. My concern is, and I'm not saying making it a requirement, but I know there has been a lot of news, a lot of cases in the news, particularly with a Texas school recently, of widespread cheating. And I know here we have some exams that are proctored and some that are not. And so we get backlash when we're asking students to use responders and then some are not. So I'm just asking if we can at least start to consider looking into it. I know some universities now that are in the online space extensively. It's a requirement if you give an online exam that is proctored. I'm not sure we're going to go to that extreme, but I'm thinking we may want to get in front of this rather than wait for a widespread cheating scandal before we try to address it. So that was more my question.
Okay, well, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you for clarifying. I think, an initiative like that would probably need to come out of Faculty Senate. It does seem to be something that the faculty obviously have a large part in and should be able to sort of direct when it would be appropriate to make sure that all students were using the same sort of plagiarism detection technology. It is certainly true that academic conduct issues were up last semester, as you'd probably expect. But I'm not sure that every instructor would be careful using the same kind of software or processes as you might see in a field that places more value on sort of traditional testing experiences.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, Anne-Marie, if you want to just, you're welcome to shoot me an email about your concern and we can see how it can be addressed.
Yeah, me too as well, please. I'd like to hear more about what you're thinking.
Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and in the interest of time, move on. So we're on item 6, my report. So, and I have, apologies, I have several things on my list. It's been a busy month, but so if I'll just jump right in. So if you're a Senate committee chair and your committee meets regularly, and by regularly, I mean monthly or more frequently, you should have received an email from me inviting you to an informal lunchtime chat with me, the chair-elect Ashley Martucci, and members of the Office of the Provost. And these lunchtime chats are just meant to be an opportunity for committee chairs to have some face time with university leadership and to discuss the goings on of the committee, to problem solve and to do things like brainstorm together. So if you are a chair and didn't receive an email with a lunchtime meeting invitation, that could be because your committee meets infrequently. So maybe it only meets like once a semester. But if you are a chair of one of those committees and would like the opportunity to participate in a lunchtime chat, just send me an email and I can get one scheduled for you. On Friday, you should have received an email from Judy Hamilton that included some syllabus language about mental health resources available to students. Student government would like to make sure that the syllabus language gets into everyone's hands so that folks can include it in their spring syllabi. So please distribute the language to your constituents if you haven't done so already. So many of you may have seen the Play with Eric tribute in E-News today. And Eric's heartbreaking story, really reminds us that there are students who are really struggling, and it's crucial that we share information about the resources available on campus, the ones that we have available to them, so that we can help them as best as we can if they're struggling. So tomorrow from 3 to 4:15, Faculty Senate and the Provost Office that we're co-sponsoring a workshop on classroom engagement. You might have seen something on e-news about it. Workshop leaders are Sarah Morris from English, Robin Hissom from Chemical Engineering, Stephanie Lorenz from Curriculum and Instruction, and Melina Bernstein from Learning Sciences. And the moderator is Suzanne Gostin-Kitchen from Management, also that's Chamber Senator. So as of this morning, there were 73 registrants, and there's still time to sign up for the workshop. So you can sign up via the announcement made in e-news where the registration link was provided. So I hope that we do see you tomorrow. And just to say one thing that this kind of workshop is distinct from the mini institute that's happening in TLC, and TLCs, they're really pointing folks to tools, and this engagement workshop is less about tools and more about the theory and philosophy behind engagement. And it's really meant to be a productive conversation. I got a preview of it this afternoon, and it's going to be really, really good. So I hope I do see you there. So also pertaining to programming available to faculty, Dave Harshberger, who's the wellness manager at the College of Medicine, wanted me to let you all know that, that their online wellness classes or workshops are available to all faculty. So not just the College of Medicine faculty members. And for a list of those offerings, you can see their weekly newsletter, which is called the Wellness Wire, or you can visit their webpage, which is wvumedicine.org/wellness. And then lastly, before we ended the semester in December, I asked faculty senators who'd been placed on the university's COVID-19 planning committees to share brief updates of the committee's kind of goings on so that I could pass those updates along to you. So I received updates from the Health and Safety, Talent and Culture, Student Life, and Operations planning committees. So I have those updates here, and I'll run through them kind of quickly. But the Health and Safety Committee meets weekly, and our faculty representative on that committee is Leslie Cottrell, and she reports that the committee has been focused on how the CDC guidelines translate to the WVU context, especially that move from the 14-day to 10-day quarantine, and other topics discussed on that committee have been about self-monitoring and student quarantine procedures. Scott Fleming is our representative on the Talent and Culture Committee, and he reports that employee communications, daily wellness checks, remote work issues such as technology and work-life balance, travel, parking, the Morgantown user fee, and social engagement have all been topics of conversation, as have conversations regarding long-term remote options post-COVID. And our Student Life Committee representative is Lisa DiBartolomeo, and she reports that the committee receives regular updates on student judiciary issues, such as when students have large parties or if students fail to test or quarantine. And they also get regular updates on from the Carew Center. So that's it for my report, and I would like to invite Leslie, Scott, or Lisa to the floor if they have anything else that they'd like to add. And then, of course, I'll take any questions. If there's anything I see, yes, go ahead, Scott.
Hello, and thank you. I appreciate the late night emails, answering the emails that I've sent out to various people as I've tried to solicit input from the various colleagues from around the university and different colleges. If you have anything that you would like me to bring up to the committee, we meet again this Friday. Please feel free to shoot me an email or give me a phone call. I'm more than willing to bring up these topics because I think some of this stuff is going to be persistent, some of it negative, some of it very positive though, and things that we can use to apply to our craft as we move forward in the future. That's it. Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Natalie, this is Leslie.
Yeah, go ahead, Leslie.
Okay. Same thing as Scott. As Natalie mentioned, our group meets weekly. We just met right before this meeting, and they were all interested if there was any questions from faculty, senators, and staff. We talk about a wide variety of things today. It was the new batch of vaccines, we tend to get into how might they be distributed and the logic behind that a little bit more. And then the bigger picture was also on the agenda today for as people start to get vaccine, how might that change the quarantine schedule and things of that sort. So if anyone has any questions, I'm happy to take those. And again, that group meets weekly. Thanks, Natalie.
Okay, go ahead, Lisa.
So the Student Life Committee meets twice a week, and I'm, as anyone else, happy to take any questions, but also any suggestions. One of the things that we've particularly been looking at is ways to engage students that don't require face-to-face interaction. So we're going to be hosting, this was my brilliant idea that now I'm stuck helping with, is a Robert Burns night, which is the traditional Scottish, the Scottish national poet, and that will be centered around January 25th. We're going to have a bunch of different events, shortbread cooking, and things like that. But because student engagement and activities on campus have been basically shunted up to after February 1st, we won't be able to do any of the face-to-face, even outdoor activities that we had planned. So student activities, things dealing with the rec center, club sports, those are all things that we look at. And that is something to keep in mind, so that if you have any student orgs or clubs, those are all supposed to be, even for outdoor activities, those are all supposed to be shifted to virtual until after February 1st.
Okay, thank you. Questions for anyone? That's me. Sorry, guys. Okay. So I see a couple of comments in the chat about the kind of mental health statement or mental health language, and that it doesn't include information, wellness information from HSC. So I will talk to the student government rep and Caruth about getting that information added. And it's since that's not an official syllabus statement, it's easy enough to change. Also, feel free to adapt that statement to your own contexts, if it makes sense. Okay, so hearing no other questions, we're going to move on to item 7, Curriculum Committee Report. Jennifer Steele. Jennifer, are you ready?
Yes, I am. So I have 5 items for approval today and 3 for information. So doing the approval items first, new courses is Annex 1, course changes Annex 2, capstone courses Annex 3, and then we have 2 new programs. There's a new major in art therapy, as well as a new certification WV Teach program in earth and space science.
So we will combine those 5 for approval items into a single votable measure. So all those in favor of approving Annex 1, the new course report, Annex 2, the course changes report, Annex 3, the capstone report, the new major in art therapy, and the new certification in WVU Teach Earth and Space Science, please raise your hand. Gonna give folks just a little bit more time. There's a little bit of a lag between when people raise their hands and when the little ticker tells you how many hands are raised. Okay, I'm going to close the vote. Okay, Dave, can you put how many ayes there are in the chat? Okay, great. And then Julie, can you clear the hands? Okay, any opposed? Please raise your hand. Okay, I'm closing the vote there. It looks like there are no opposed. Great. Okay, so all of the annexes pass. You know what I forgot to do before we voted on them? I forgot to see if there were any questions. I apologize. I apologize. Should have done that. If there had been questions, I'm assuming, or if there had been any big issues, I'm assuming folks would not have voted in favor of the for approval items, but I do apologize for that. Okay, so you have some for information items?
Sure, I'll go through this quickly. There's the grad programs report, 2 new programs passed by grad council. Then there's a new minor in secondary STEM education and a new minor in English. That one is at WVU Tech, the new minor in English.
Great. Are there questions about the for information items? Okay, then thank you very much, Jennifer. We're going to move on to our Jeffco report. Lisa D, are you ready?
Sure. So our next Jeffco meeting is February 1st, and we have a slate of honors courses that we're going to be looking at. The template honors courses will now be essentially given to us, this new slate. We're going to have that to review, and we're also going to have a report from Lou Slimak on some assessment projects regarding Jeff Area 3, and then the committee will also talk about ideas of how to assess Jeff Area 7 with regard to the social justice piece that the provost asked us to look at the beginning of the year. We decided that looking at the assessment of Jeff Area 7 might actually coincide well with the social justice piece, arising primarily from the focus of last summer, but it gives us a good opportunity to look at both and to make sure that the committee is focusing on the right things. So that'll be February 1st.
Questions regarding Jeff? Okay, then we will move on to our teaching and assessment committee report. Jessica, are you ready?
Yes, I am. Thank you, Natalie. So I just have one update, or rather reminder, and that is with regard to the early semester teaching assessment. Given just the timing, instructors will be receiving the opt-in email starting January 19th. They will receive one reminder email shortly thereafter, depending on whether they're teaching an 8-week course or a 16-week course. So just keep a lookout for that email from ITS allowing you to opt in. And that's all I have, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Questions about Taco? Okay, moving on. Next, have the Committee on Committee Membership and Constituencies report. Michael Germana, are you ready?
I am. I have only one for approval item. This is Annex 5. This is an updated roster for the Jeffco committee. The only addition or change is the addition of Lori Sherlock's name to the roster.
Are there any questions about Annex 5? Okay, all those in favor of approving Annex 5, please raise your hand. Okay, I'm going to close the vote in just a couple of seconds here. Okay, I'm closing the vote. Okay, so there are 87 ayes. Julie, can you clear all the hands? Any opposed? Please raise your hand. Okay, I'm closing the vote. There are no opposed. Terrific. Okay, so just a couple more items. We are on item 11, the report from the faculty representative of the state government. Roy Nutter, are you ready?
I am. Roy Nutter, Statler College, and your ACF rep. Really, that's been really quiet considering it's an election year. The next thing is up for next ACF meeting will be 21st of January. And then appreciated Rob's report on the legislature. Their opening day is actually this coming Wednesday, but the 20th, let's see, February 10th is the essentially opening day, although this week they meet and vote on committees and things like that. And given it's election year, the governor always has a month to put his act together, the new governor. Since it hasn't changed, it'll still be a month in between. So the official day then, February 10th, for the legislature, and that will go through April the 10th. So that completes my report.
Other questions for Roy? Okay, hearing no questions, we will move on to our Board of Governors report. Stan Heilman. Stan, are you ready?
Yes, ma'am. The board met on December 18th and has been typical over the last number of meetings. We talked a lot about what Rob presented today, a lot of the finances, as well as a lot of the COVID updates. We also extended the special emergency leave plan for 90 days, approved 2 interim appointments to the WVU Health System Board of Directors, and then brought up a rule change for one of the Board of Governors rules 3.4 on drug and alcohol testing. That was to bring it into federal compliance with the Federal Transit Administration and Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration rules as to which drugs are covered. Mostly that added things like opiates, codeine, heroin, and various of the odones that get out there too. So that was largely what we did in the public session. And the next meeting is February 19th.
Okay, other questions for Stan? Always muted. Is there next? Is there any new business? Okay, it doesn't sound like there's any new business. Is there a motion to adjourn? Okay, 3 hands. Can you clear those hands, Julie? Is there a second? Okay, lots of seconds. All right, we are adjourned. Thanks very much, everyone. We'll see you next time.